Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast, where Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump. Wait a minute, is this right? This doesn't look right. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Welcome back. Another edition of the Right Guys podcast. My name is Max McGuire, here with Mr. Producer Josh Hammerling. Lots to get into today. It's been an interesting 72 hours.
You think?
The Democrat Party has coalesced around Kamala Harris. I don't know if you saw it, except for Black Lives Matter. I don't know if you saw that. Black Lives Matter is demanding a primary.
That's interesting. Is it because maybe she's not, completely black? Is that what it is? I don't know.
Well, you're not allowed to say she's not black. You can say that she's not an African American because her father was Jamaican. You can say that she is not descendant from slaves because her family was actually slave owners. If you trace it back. Her skin color is sufficiently dark enough and to be black or to be a person of color, depending on how they want to define it. But that's what they try and trick you up with, right? People are like, oh, she's not black. No, I mean, she meets the definitions of black, but she doesn't meet the definition of an African American. And definitely not one who has a family history stemming from slavery in the United States. So they've coalesced around her, and there have been a flurry of polls. Every polling outfit wants to get out there. And I had to turn off social media yesterday, turn off Twitter a little bit yesterday, just because the Kamala Harris simps, the stans, the fanboys and fangirls kept pushing. Oh, look, she's a little bit closer in this poll, or she's leading in this poll. And it got to the point where even me knowing, hey, don't listen to it, right? Even I looked at it and said, well, let's see what is going on here, because the top line numbers that were coming out didn't make sense. So there's the main number that you see, right? When you see a poll, and I'll go ahead and put up the Real Clear Politics average. That's what I tend to use. I don't trust 538 at all. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
They've been dubious in the past.
Yes.
And they've been very left-leaning, to say the least.
All right, how's that? Can you see this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me zoom in. So everyone can see it easily. Okay, so here, Trump-Harris. These are the polls. So right around here, everything before this point had nothing to do with Joe Biden dropping out. I mean, technically. But the thing is, they've been poll testing this. What happens if he drops out and it's Kamala Harris, because of the pressure campaign on Joe Biden to drop out. So even though these two polls, CBS News and Reuters, didn't include that, it wasn't post-dropout, they did poll that question because they were not idiots. They were smart enough to ask the question. So you've got 7 polls that have either been completely conducted after Joe Biden dropped out, or at the very least partially conducted after he dropped out. So I want to go through a couple of these, but I think I want to start with what was the one? Yahoo? Yeah, Yahoo YouGov, because they have it as a tie. And this one makes no sense to me, because it is primarily before the dropout, but it is the most one of the two most pro-Harris polls of this class of polls. So let's look at this for a second.
Yeah,
these are top line data numbers, top line metrics. Most of the polls will let you see this. Some of them, like what's the one that doesn't let you see it? Reuters doesn't like to let you in. I think they want like a membership.
Yeah.
But most of them will let you see it. This tends to be not what the media outlets cover. So this is the poll question they asked. If the 2024 election for president were held today, and these were the options, who would you pick? And they list Kamala, Trump, RFK Jr., Cornel West, Jill Stein, Libertarian, yada, yada, yada. So when everyone's together, it's 43-41. Now, when it's just Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and they're not counting everything else, it's 46-46. So they're saying it's a tie. The problem with this really comes from the weighting. So the biggest secret in polling is that a poll is only as good as the vision that the pollster has for what the electorate looks like. Because they're not just calling people at random and saying, hey, who do you want? They want to create a poll sample size, unweighted, or if they don't do a good job, weighted, sample size that reflects America. So they want a certain number of men, certain number of women, certain number of all different ages, white, black, Hispanic. They want to have a certain number of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. So when you see a poll that doesn't look, it looks off. It looks different. The first thing that I tend to look for are the actual top line numbers for how the survey sample is broken down. So in this one, for this question from YouGov Yahoo News, and this is going to be a little bit boring for some people, but it's important to know this because they are trying to shove these polls down your throat to make you think that Kamala Harris is gaining on Trump. And it just isn't the case because there are serious methodological flaws in these surveys. So right here, this is the bit about they're tied, right? If you go down here and look at party ID, you can see what's here. This is called weighted N. This is out of the 1,700 people that they called. They took the responses that they got from Democrats, Republicans, independents, and they weighted it to try and come up with a electoral breakdown that they think election day will look like. Basically, what they're trying to give you is, based on the people we've called, this is what we think election day would look like based on who we think is going to vote. So when you look at this weighted number and you realize that the weighted is 1,178, their weighted number for Democrats in the survey is 439. They get that because they believe, I'll just do the number, I don't want to get it wrong, 439 divided by 1178. That's them saying that they believe the electorate is 37% Democrat. Remember that, 37% Democrat. You look at the Republican, they're 417 divided by 1178.
Yeah.
They're saying that the electorate is 35% Republican. And you look at independents, 260 divided by 1178. They're saying that they're 22% independents. So in their mind, the biggest subset of voters in America are Democrats, and the smallest subset of voters are independents. That defies logic, both from the results of their survey. Their survey found that no, Democrats didn't make up 37%. They made up 33%. Republicans 29, independent 25, and then other not sure. But if you look at Gallup and Pew Research have been tracking this for years, decades, how people identify in the United States. And you look at the Gallup tracking poll. The Gallup tracking poll for this year, conducted in June, so not even that long ago, this June found that the United States electorate is 25% Republicans, 51% independents, and 23% Democrats.
Damn.
So so you look at Pew, it's a little bit different, saying 33, 32, 29. But the idea that Democrats are running away with this thing and that they are the most plentiful voting bloc in America is just not true. Either you discount independents and put them as leaners, and that's basically a wash, even Republicans, Democrats, or you treat them the way that they're self-identifying. So important, remember this number, 25, 23, 51. You would expect, if you wanted to create a vision for what the country looks like, you would expect that they would create that vision based on what the country actually looks like. But in their view, independents are not a majority of the voters. In their view, independents are the smallest subset of voters. So this becomes significant because when you oversample in your weighted number, when you oversample Democrats, right? Well, what are you going to get? You're going to get more
Democrat answers. Yeah.
Kamala Harris votes. When you undersample independents, what are you going to get? traditionally you're going to get fewer Donald Trump votes. Now here they're claiming that independents are completely split. That I don't believe at all, because every other poll that's come out in the past week shows Donald Trump winning in independents. But when you oversample Democrats, right? Even saying independents are a wash, right? If that was weighted differently, if this was actually given a 50% of the electorate weighting and Republicans and Democrats were equal, Donald Trump would be running away with this thing. The only reason it's tied is because in their mind, there are more Democrats than Republicans.
Which is fascinating, because how often do we hear from them that it's always independents that make up or like make the election happens, right? And they're so busy chasing independents. So I mean, why would you not weight it? They should be the most weighted person in this poll, since they represent the largest number of undecided voters out there, right? I mean, at least voting bloc.
It absolutely should be, right? And the fact that when they called these people, they saw that it was about even, right, between Democrat, Republican, and independent, but they still saw fit to say, no, even that's wrong. There should be 4% more Democrats. That's a problem.
Just making crap up.
So, yes. So the reason that I don't really look too kindly on this Yahoo poll right here that says it's a tie is it's a tie because they have oversampled Democrats. Because they have an unrealistic view of what the electorate looks like, and they think that the electorate is more Democrats than anything else, which isn't true.
Well, Max, if they had done like an honest poll, the numbers would be far too negative for Harris's campaign, which they can't have. I mean, the fascist government of the Democrat Party and media are so in bed with each other that, I mean, they're struggling to try to make Kamala look like she's electable. I mean, they're more than struggling.
They're struggling. They are struggling, and they are jumping through hoops, bending over backwards to make it look like she's gaining ground and winning. Here's Reuters. Reuters has the same problem. They hide their top line data behind a paywall, but of the things that we can see, they have the same problem. When you look at the Reuters Ipsos poll, conducted 22nd to 23rd, yada, 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 the sample includes 1,018 registered voters, 426 Democrats, 376 Republicans, and 341 independents. They have the same problem. Actually, it's worse, because in their mind, 42% of the electorate are Democrats.
That's just insane. It's an asinine state. Like, it's a really dishonest position to take, because I'm looking over at the Ipsos polls, and suddenly Harris is up by 4, up by 3, up by 2 from yesterday on just general election. And you're going to tell me that there was an 8-point swing since Kamala came out and put herself out there? I'm just not seeing it. But they're desperate, right? I mean,
but again,
they're desperate.
They're saying she gets 44% of the vote. But they're also saying that 42% of the electorate are Democrats. Do you see how this is a problem?
They're almost doubling their size.
Yes.
They're almost doubling.
Yes. But you understand that if she has 44% of the vote in their survey, because they say 42% of the electorate are Democrats, you understand what happens if you reduce the Democrat percentage to realistic numbers of around 30, 33, around there, right?
It drops like
she
a rock.
no longer has 44% of the vote.
Yeah. No
I mean,
it would plummet. It plummets significantly.
The only reason it's at 44% is because of that 42% miscalculation.
It's like padding the books. Like, if I had an accountant that was doing this sort of stuff, I'd fire them. I'd fire them fast, because there's only so much cooking in the books you can do before it starts being a real problem. And they see a real problem, Max. That's why I mean they're fudging these numbers. But did you think they'd be so blatant about it, like just days after she announces? I mean, talk about having a plan in the books.
The Reuters poll has always been bad for Trump, because they are confronting this based on, what do you think the electoral population, the voters makeup, what do you think it's going to look like on election day? And they have to do that for everything. What percentage of the vote do you think will be Gen Z, millennial, Gen X, baby boomers, right? They have to make all these assumptions. And even if they're off by a little bit, right? Off by a little bit is the difference between at distance is the difference between hitting your target and missing by a mile, right?
Yeah, even
so
if just 5%.
If the foundation for their assumptions aren't correct here, they'll never be right. So that's why when I'm looking at it, someone said, oh, 42% of the respondents in this survey are Democrats. What are you doing here? What are you doing here?
And it purposely undersamples any other voter.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to notice that. Nobody digs into the polls. Nobody really reads the polls. Just the general public sees the polls, and then that's what they start operating with, which we've seen this in all the last elections. They sit there and try to elevate the polls. It happened in 2016 with Hillary, right? She was leading in every single poll right up until the day it started and Trump won, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because they made a mistake. I think they've been padding the polls. Like this is part of the propaganda machine. This is part of what, it's how they help their candidate, right? And I've never known a group to ever be pro-Republican or even independent in some of these. It's always been pro-Democrat, right?
Yeah.
Talk about a monopoly on the polling.
Well, some of these polls are decent, right? I mean, the polls that accurately understand. I mean, and this is the other thing. All of these polls, even the ones that say we think most of the voters will be, a plurality of voters will be registered Democrats, right? Yeah. Even when they poll based on excitement, how excited are you to vote? All of these polls are still finding that the Republicans are far more excited to cast a ballot than Democrats. So their own poll defies their assumption, right? Republicans will crawl over broken glass to cast a ballot. Many of them, most of them, will crawl over broken glass to cast a ballot this election. And this is why the other problem you see with a lot of these polls, likely voters at this stage in the game with early voting starting in a month and a half, I care more about likely voters than registered voters. I care about what the people who are probably going to vote say than what the registered voters who only vote when they accidentally wander into a polling place. So let me show another one. I don't want to get, because we have a bit I want to cover. So NPR PBS, it's Marist University. Trump +1. The left is using this saying, wow, Kamala Harris is within 1, right? Mm-hmm. She's in striking distance. Well, here's the deal. Look down here. When NPR, PBS, Marist, when they polled this question at the beginning of July, Harris was winning +1. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, that's before Trump was shot. That's before the convention. That's before Joe Biden dropped out. But it's after he was very obviously unwell at the debate. So Donald Trump has moved +2 in this poll. But when you actually dive in and you look at it, there is nothing in this poll that Democrats should be happy about. Saying Donald Trump right here. This is if November election were held today, who do you vote for? Kamala Harris, this first row column, Donald Trump, the second column. So they're saying that Donald Trump wins 10% of the Democrat vote. That's terrible for Democrats, right? Well, whereas Donald Trump only loses 5% of the vote. Okay, he has them smashing. This poll has Donald Trump smashing Kamala Harris in independents, 46-32. Has 14% of Democrat men voting for Trump. That seems significant, right? Meanwhile, single-digit men and women Republicans voting for Kamala Harris. You look at independent men, 50% of independent men voting for Trump, 43% of independent women voting for Trump in the survey. That seems like it would be something they should talk about rather than just saying, oh, wow, Kamala Harris is in striking distance, ignoring that she's actually lost 2 points in a month, in half a month in this poll, and that these top line numbers by demographics are terrifying for Democrats. Of the people who strongly approved of Joe Biden, 11% are still voting for Donald Trump.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Wow.
That's crazy. Now let's look down here. This is where, if you're a Democrat, this should scare the shit out of you as Mr. Producer Josh sneezes. Look at race and ethnicity. White people. Okay, I expect. No, I didn't. White people. Okay, I expect Donald Trump would win white voters 53-40. But let's look below it. Let's look at right here. Black. According to this NPR PBS Marist poll, when Kamala Harris goes up against Donald Trump wins 34% of the black vote.
And that's a significant change. Remember when it'd sit in the 7s and 4s. I mean, It was single digits at one point 10 plus years ago, right? Just the fact that he's at 34%. I mean, they're probably shitting the proverbial bed at this point. Like they don't know how to answer this. And the only way to really do that is to keep Kamala off TV, right? I mean, she's really got to keep her mouth shut.
Yeah.
I mean, the less she talks, the better she'll do. Because looking at these numbers, and as you start going down that list too, the one right below it's also blowing my mind because it's an even higher flip. That Latino vote is at 39 for Donald Trump. Did you ever think there would be a number that high for a Republican candidate?
No.
And I'll answer it no. I mean, we never thought that was going to happen. And what's wild is that this goes totally against looking at 538's polls because I brought it up and I wanted to see where they were at on it. And they're
all over.
Suddenly, Harris is up 4 points in 2 days.
Yeah.
Are you telling me there's a 15 to 20 point swing?
There is not a single poll that's been released to suggest that. But 538 doesn't care about polls. They do modeling. And they say that because she's the vice president, that's worth more than the fact that every poll says she's losing. 538, ever since they lost Nate Silver, isn't worth shit. Just isn't.
Yeah.
So let me finish talking about this. If 34% of the black vote, if that's true, and that might be high, but if that's true, it's over. It's over, right? Look at these Latino votes. Look at this Latino.
That would just blow me away.
Kamala Harris versus Trump. 51% Kamala Harris, 39% Trump. That, according to exit polls, is 7%. That 39% is 7% higher than Donald Trump polled with Latinos in 2020. So he's getting more female votes. He's getting a hell of a lot more black votes. He's getting more Latino votes. And yet the way they've weighted this makes it look like he's only winning by 1.
Oh, the machine is grinding away.
Area description. Look at this. Big city. Donald Trump is winning 35% of the urban vote.
Imagine that, because those are your biggest population centers for voting, man. You're talking about a couple million in Denver, right? You're talking about a couple million in pick your big state, right? I mean, imagine if that holds true in New York City. What happens if that holds true in Los Angeles? What happens if that holds true in like Miami, which we kind of already know? But I mean, let those numbers just sink in. I mean, you're talking about name the big city in Michigan, right?
Detroit,
Motor City.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine if that's the one.
That was the poll.
That's wild.
That was the poll that came out right before Joe Biden dropped out, which was a Michigan poll showing Donald Trump winning by 7 in the state and winning every single county, including the counties for Detroit metro area. So if Donald Trump is getting 35% of the vote in big cities, and 43% of the vote in small cities, and 52 and 55% of the vote in small town rural, and 50% of suburbia. And he's winning 53% of Gen Xers and 42% of millennials.
That's huge.
Right? And he's even on women, 45-45. There is no way in hell this poll should look like he's only winning by 1. And that's what I want to hammer home. They have ignored this. This is their respondents. And they have crafted a vision of what they say the electorate looks like to make sure that this doesn't reflect in an electoral landslide. Because this Marist poll that they're running, she's only down by 1. She's closed the gap. Again, for everyone just joining, That poll that has Trump only winning by 1 has him winning 34% of the black vote. That's the higher range of the polls that we're going to cover in terms of that. But that's not the kind of thing you can just ignore. It isn't.
But they have to, because it looks so damning. The
Yeah.
Kamala team has. I mean, they've just got to start making stuff up, because if this truth really started coming out, their biggest fear is that their base doesn't turn out for the vote, right? This is assuming that they get the same kind of turnout that they got 4 years ago in 2020. I have yet to see a Democrat who's been excited about voting. I've talked to a lot of Democrats where suddenly
they were already excited. That's the thing. They were already excited.
Yeah. There's Democrats I'm talking to in Colorado, and there's some staunch Democrats here in Colorado, let me tell you guys. And they are completely blown away by what the Dems have pulled and how they're just. One of them told me, I'm never going to vote for her because I didn't vote for her to get in there. I didn't have a say, right? And at least on the Trump side. Now, they didn't say they're voting Trump. They just said they're not voting Kamala. Now, I don't know what that means. Can be good for the Harris campaign, right? There are people that are willing to just stay home.
Yeah.
We always say it's that stay home party. It's how you energize your base, which reflects how you're going to perform in the general election. I've never seen a more electrified base when it comes to the Republicans. I've never seen a more demoralized base when it comes to the Democrats. I haven't seen a demoralized base like this in almost 20 or 30 years. I mean, it's it's a 4-alarm fire going on right now. They're pulling every alarm on that they can on the way out. And the only help they can start getting as they approach the election are these polls, because they're trying to influence outcome now, right? That's why they're putting this out there. This is all just propaganda, trying to convince you that if you're a Trump voter, you don't need to, or it's okay to start voting for Kamala Harris, right? That's the other thing is people want to vote for Trump. There's people that are still trying to figure out if they want to vote for Harris in their party. I mean, it's all on fire, Max. The whole house is coming down, and it's coming down quick. But they're going to lie. They need to. They have to. I mean, they have to. There's nothing positive out there right now.
Yeah.
There's just nothing positive.
So let me look at a poll that I actually really do like. This is the Harris poll, Forbes Harris. Let me get to the right page. This is right here. Okay. There we go. Forbes Harris X. Let me zoom in.
There you go.
Okay. So if the election was held today, 50% Trump, 41% Harris. You start looking at these breakdowns. Okay, they're about even in Democrats, and they underreported independents. Okay, independents broke for Trump 48-33. So even if these Republicans and Democrats are reduced, shrunk down to actual size, like we talked about, you're still going to see a very significant result just like this. Looking at the African-American community, Black, 25% of Black respondents supported Trump. Wow. 45 for Black respondents. For Hispanics, it was even 45-45. Again, showing 39%, slightly higher than that 35%, but showing 39% in urban areas. 63% in rural areas. See, this is when you actually have a model that closely reflects the electorate, you get a completely different result by the people who are literally closing their eyes, closing their ears, la, 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 la. Everyone who votes on election day will be a Democrat. Everyone else stays home. That's the craziness. If you live in that craziness world where you actually believe that Democrats outnumber every other type of voter, you get a poll that shows Kamala Harris ahead, tied, or down by 1. When you build this weighting according to what the electorate actually looks like, you reach a very different result. Donald Trump leading by 50. And at the end of the day, when I told you I want to talk about this, what you texted me earlier was we have to make sure we explain to people that no matter what the polls say, you still have to vote, because that's the real thing here, right? All of this is paper. All of this are people with political science degrees, statistic degrees saying this is what we think the electorate looks like. This is what people have told us. So this is what we think the vote would be. At the end of the day, that doesn't mean shit. At the end of the day, you got to vote. You got to vote like your life depends on it, because seeing the things that come out of Kamala Harris's mouth, your life very well may depend on it. The craziness, the absolute craziness coming out of her mouth.
They're so scared. They're trying so hard right now to influence the outcome. And Max, remember when Joe Biden was leading in all the polls leading up to Trump's loss in 2020, and then after the election happens, all the craziness, all they point back to was that he was leading in the polls. He was leading in the polls, and that was a reason to throw away any suspicions that somebody might have had about the actual outcome of the election. And now we don't have that same thing. It's like they want to try to set that same stage before the next election happens, right? Mm-hmm. Suddenly Kamala Harris is just leading in all the national polls. And she will, just because that's what they do.
Yeah.
So in the event that, some wonkiness happens in this next election, you got plausible deniability, right? But I don't think they get away with that one in this one. I think there's not enough deniability.
Look at this statistic.
What's this one for? That's a
this is the Harris X Forbes poll for Trump African American male. So this says for every 10 African American men who would walk into a voting booth, this poll suggests that 3.5 would vote for Trump.
Yeah, if you round, it's 4.
Yeah.
If you round up,
4.
right?
Yeah.
Let's say 4.
4.
Imagine that.
4 and 10. 4 and 10. Why is that significant? There are sections of this country that every election vote 100% for the Democrat candidate. Yeah. It is something that literally defies statistics. It defies logic. They are claiming that there are entire neighborhoods in New York and Philadelphia and Detroit where there is not even a single Republican voter. There is not even someone who accidentally votes for a Republican.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back decades. Philadelphia is terrible. Terrible. They literally claim there were neighborhoods where they literally claimed that Joe Biden won 100% of the vote. Now, there's a lot of theories for how you get to that number. Ballot harvesting is the most likely way you get to that number. Mm-hmm. You send ballots out, you pick them up. Even if people aren't going to request a ballot, you go out and you ask them to request a ballot. And then you show up a couple weeks later when they all drop and you pick it up. Now, the cynic in me would say that a lot of times those ballots are picked up empty and they're filled out. That's the cynic in me. I don't buy that this is an essential service only dealing with people who are elderly, infirm, and unable to make it to a drop box or a mailbox. You cannot, let's just, for all intents and purposes, we're going to call that cheating. even if it is according to law, the idea that you could have people out there collecting ballots that may or may not be filled in from people who only requested them because a ballot harvester told them to. We're going to call that collectively as cheating. That's the definition for this video of what cheating is defined by. You cannot cheat your way to 100% of the vote in these urban neighborhoods when 37% of Black men are supporting Trump. You can't do it. As long as it's single-digit percents, you can plausibly argue, oh, well, yeah, he had 9% support in the polls, but they just weren't in our neighborhood, right? You can plausibly argue that the 9% in the polls were somewhere else. But when you see 37% support, and then you see for locale, it's still the same, 39% urban. What this poll is saying is that, yes, Donald Trump does have African-American support, significant, between 3 and 10, 4 and 10 support. And yes, it exists in urban centers. We're not talking about he only gets support from African Americans who live in the suburbs. No,
Sure.
this is saying that he's getting urban support. So you're not going to be able to, again, we use the definition for this purpose, cheat your way towards 100% turnout for Joe Biden in a precinct that has between 30 and 40% of African American males voting for Trump. You can't do it. You can't do it. And what I think you're likely going to see, and I hope we can get this on camera, because that would be really fun. I think you're likely going to see ballot harvesters attempting to harvest ballots for Democrats from voters who would fight them to stop it and say, oh, no, I'm voting for Trump. So it's early, ballots haven't dropped, but I suspect it might just be anecdotes that we hear. I suspect that there are going to be a lot of ballot harvesters showing up expecting compliance, like, oh, yeah, here's the ballot, go for it. Instead, being met with, oh, hell no, I'm not voting for that.
Yeah. The monopoly that the Democrat Party has enjoyed with the African American community is gone, and that should be that's earth shaking. The very foundations of the Democrat Party now have fallen, right? And they just can't lie their way through it again. They just can't make stuff up and expect people to believe it or even push back, right? When we have an entire cultural institutional change like that, you can only lie to a group of people so long before it goes horribly, horribly wrong, right? Or they start figuring it out.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time, but they're starting to figure it out, right? They've realized they've been lied to so long by Democrats, and they've been taken for granted by Democrats. And that's the really, really awful part, right?
Yes.
The way that the Pelosi's of the world and the Schumers of the world treat African American communities, how they've been lied to so often, expecting change and just getting more of the same. So the Democrats only have one group to blame, and that's themselves for what's happened here. They're going to come up with some sort of excuse that they've been poisoned by Donald Trump, but they poisoned everything themselves, right? They've done the dirty work themselves, and they've screwed it up. And I don't see how they come back from this. I mean, because here's the kicker, Donald Trump does get elected. If he does, and he wins, and we start seeing significant change in African American communities, do you think the Democrats will ever get a hold of that voting block again? They won't. Because they know there will be something better out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly possible. It's certainly possible.
Sure.
It's certainly possible. And I don't know if this necessarily means, like, if Donald Trump gets that significant of an African-American vote, I don't think it necessarily means a realignment, because Kamala Harris is objectively a terrible candidate. She's Black herself, but as I said,
Sure.
She is not African American. She is not. It feels weird for me to say this, because who am I to say that? She did not grow up experiencing the same things that many African Americans did in our country. She grew up with an Indian mother, raised Indian, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But it's reflected in how she governed. Right. So do I think this is necessarily a realignment in the African American community? I don't know. But I do know that African American men are appalled by Kamala Harris, just as they were appalled by her when she ran for president in 2020, didn't get a single vote, and was forced to drop out before the first caucus because of her record as a prosecutor. Democrats are going to try and make this that, oh, it's the prosecutor versus the felon. But when you dive into what she actually did as a prosecutor, it's abhorrent. It's absolutely abhorrent.
It was basically like slave labor almost.
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris's AG office tried to keep inmates locked up for cheap labor. Let's set the stage. California had terrible overcrowding in their prisons.
Yeah, I remember.
Supreme Court ordered California to start releasing people early, because it's inhumane to have prisons at 200% capacity. Kamala Harris's office fought that. They fought that. They slow walked it. And one of the reasons that they argued, put it right here, this was actually put into a brief. They said, quote, extending 2-for-1 credits to all minimum custody inmates at this time would severely impact fire camp participation, a dangerous outcome while California is in the middle of a difficult fire season and severe drought. What does that mean? Inmates do the jobs of clearing brush, of making sure that the preventative measures are taken to stop wildfires, forest fires. Those are jobs that are typically done by inmates. So this was a brief that was submitted to the court saying that we can't release these people as you're ordering us to because it would be really hard to fight forest fires. Well, no, they could still fight the forest fires.
They just have to pay somebody.
But they wouldn't be able to do it by only paying them $2 a day.
Oh, my gosh.
That's the problem. No one's denying that they could find someone else to do this work, but they couldn't find someone willing to do it. It would be illegal to find someone to do it for $2 a day.
Kamala Harris was willing to keep people in prison so they could keep costs down. Her motivation was to keep people in prison so they could keep costs down. That's dehumanizing.
They also argued that outside of the forest fire argument, it would still deplete the labor force internally, I guess making license plates, and in local communities where low-level nonviolent offenders work for pennies on the dollar, collecting trash and tending to city parks. No, Supreme Court, we can't release these people out of cruel and unusual punishment. Unconstitutional. No, we can't release them because then the parks will be dirty. This was her office. This was a case that was under her. Now, Kamala Harris says she didn't know about this.
Bullshit.
She loves to take credit for the things that go well. And when there's things that go poorly, she says, oh, that wasn't me. That was one of staff. I'm sorry. The buck stops with her.
Yeah.
The buck stops with her. They made this argument that no, we have to keep people in prison longer than the Supreme Court allows, because otherwise we have to pay someone more than $2 a day to do these jobs. That's slave labor.
Yeah, you would hope that slavery doesn't exist in a country like ours anymore, but Kamala Harris is at the forefront of making sure it survived. So the state of California can enjoy clean parks. That's just the most, and it's repugnant.
Yeah.
Everything that it stands for. I mean, what is this?
This is a mosaic of Kamala Harris made up, allegedly, of the men that she kept in prison longer because she wanted them as slave labor.
Wow.
Now, I say allegedly because this has been floating around. It's going to need to be fact-checked and verified. But if you could make it, if this isn't it, if you could make that mosaic, this should be at every one of Donald Trump's rallies.
Yeah.
Just like he looked up at that sign to say, oh, look at immigration numbers. This should be up there. Say, oh, you guys like this? Like this mosaic? It's really cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's made up of all of the African-American people that Kamala Harris kept in prison longer than she should have because she wanted them as slave labor.
It's a powerful statement. And it would hit home, right? I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about it. If she's willing to do that when she was in California in her position of power, do you think she won't do that when she has the entire Justice Department at her fingertips? When she has the big time lawyer right on the end of the phone to say, go after this, she will have her own Justice Department, gang. Think about it. Let it sink in.
This is why they're calling it the honeymoon period for her. Like, oh, all the Democrats are rallying around her. Oh, look, she's even getting conservatives. No conservative will vote for her. I don't care if you hate Donald Trump with every fiber of your being.
Yeah.
If you call yourself a conservative and actually believe in conservatism, you cannot cast a ballot for the most liberal senator, Not me saying that. That's GovTrack. That's the nonpartisan government resource that tracks that. Like GovTrack is what we use for pieces of legislation, saying who voted on what. Let me see if I can pull it up.
It's just, and the party's embracing her as like this great peacemaker who's going to come in and be the antithesis of Donald Trump. And it's just, it's just not the case. I mean, this is wild. So what's the question that we're looking at there? Was she the most liberal ever?
Let's go CNN.
Okay.
Fact check. Is Kamala Harris the most liberal member of the Senate?
And the answer is?
What do they say? They don't answer it.
They don't even answer it, right? There's always like a yes or a no, right? That they put at the top, or liar, liar, pants on fire, that kind of stuff, right?
There we go. Here we go. This is GovTrack. GovTrack 2020 report cards ideology score. All senators.
Wow.
So the closer you are to 1, the more conservative you are. The closer you are to 0, the more leftist you are.
Sure.
So let's see. We'll stop when we find Kamala Harris.
Not bad.
These are all Republicans.
Yeah, we can tell so far, which is kind of crazy that there's still. Oh, there's the D shows up. Oh, I saw Feinstein go by. Saw Durbin go by. Reed, Booker, Gillibrand, Harris, Sanders. Oh my gosh.
She is 99th out of 100. Only Bernie Sanders. So she is the most leftist Democrat in the Senate. Only Bernie Sanders, not the socialist, Democratic socialist Bernie Sanders, is to the left of her. And it is only by a smidgen.
Yeah.
It is only by a smidgen.
And it probably had to do with her not voting on something, right?
Yes, she probably missed a vote. She probably missed a vote. And Bernie Sanders got that extra hit. This is the honeymoon period that is going to end. If Donald Trump gets through this honeymoon period and he's still ahead, she will start sinking like a rock. Just like she sank like a rock when she had to push her own agenda before the Democrat primaries. It is, you don't need a crystal ball to understand that if this had been a real primary, where different candidates could actually throw their head in the ring and have a contested primary, Kamala Harris would not have won. She wouldn't have.
And as you point this out, if you're making a solid case on it, it just proves that she is the throwaway candidate. Because if they really had a candidate they wanted out there, they would be the candidate going after the middle of the lane people. They would have a candidate going after the independents, right? And she does not do that. She does not pull with independents. They have the most liberal person out there. So that just tells me that, like, they just had to put somebody out there, right? And they were going to choose Kamala Harris.
They couldn't take it away from the black vice president, the black female vice president.
That was the other piece I was gonna say, right? Because you just can't have her not run for president after being vice president for so long with Joe Biden, right? And especially the record he tries to claim that she ran on, and all that craziness, man. So it feels more of a throwaway than anybody else.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find on the Real Clear Politics. Let me see if I can find Harris's.
She's so far from centrist. It's wild. I didn't realize that she was that super liberal. To only be the only worst liberal is Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
like that says something, right? It's like, holy crap, you can't vote for her. Everything would be, free money for everything from now on.
You can't. So, it's not letting me do this. Here we go. So one of the things that is really remarkable about this honeymoon period is that the very act of stabbing Joe Biden in the back and taking the presidential slot has apparently made her more likable, which defies logic. She has, over the course of her entire vice presidency, scored no higher than 44%. There's a 45%. There's a couple of outliers, but she has traditionally been in the high 30s for approval rate. She is the least popular vice president in the modern era since we've been polling it. When you see on TikTok and and Twitter, the left is going, yay, yay, yay. No one liked her. So if the act of becoming the presidential nominee during this honeymoon period makes this 38-39 approval rating tick up to 43, that might look good on these polls. But guess what? She didn't actually do anything to change the public's opinion of her. And the more information gets out there, the more the public learns about it, the harder it is going to be for her to actually run on her record, because there's the things she's actually done and said. There's the bad stuff that Biden's done that she wants to take credit for, right? Mm-hmm. It is a cluster. It is, you understand. I suspect that the reason that she's being coronated is because no one else wants it. Yeah. No one wants to have to defend Joe Biden's legacy.
Or to take on Trump, right? They don't want to have to go out there and actually throw punches on the guy who right now is knocking everybody out that he gets into the ring with. I mean, you probably, they don't want to have to go and do that, because there's no way they would survive politically. Like, if they're going to put up somebody new, they want them to actually have a shot. They know this is you still all have to go out there and vote. But I mean, this feels like a Donald Trump win that's coming up now. And they're not going to waste a good candidate on it. They're not. I mean, they think in like 50 years down the road.
And even the polls where they have played games with the sample and the weighting, that say, oh, Donald Trump's only winning by 2, right? When you look at the question that they ask, who do you think will win, regardless of who you're voting for, who do you think will win? These samples say, oh, Trump, 52% to 35%.
Yeah.
So that's where you get the enthusiasm gap, that even the liberals believe that Donald Trump will win. As you get closer to election day, if that holds true, you're going to see depressed turnout, because why vote if you think the other guy's going to win? The challenge, though, for us, for conservatives, that we're going to all have to do is not take the bait and make it all about laughing about her cackle, or highlighting how she slept her way into politics. Technically, she did. She dated Willie Brown, and while dating him, he introduced her to the power brokers in San Francisco and California that got her launched into politics. You can't make those arguments, though, because the left's going to be, oh, they're just sexist, misogynist. Yeah. Even though it is true, what we have to do is we have to focus on what she's actually said. Tie her to the Biden administration's failures. Tie her to the cover-up of Joe Biden's health. They can have their little song and dance, right? That, oh, wow, we have a great nominee. We still need to unpack the fact that she's been covering up and hiding crippling dementia for God knows how long.
Yeah, she was the vice president. She had to have known how bad this was.
And then we have to attack her on her core beliefs, that no matter what she says, her history and her record proves that she believes it, and she would do this if given positions of power. The problem is that list is so long, it's impossible to get it into a 30-second ad. This is a 90-second ad that's now running in Pennsylvania, put together by the Republican Pennsylvania candidate for Senate. Let's play that.
Harris is inspiring and very capable. The more
So that's Bob Casey. He is the Democrat senator. So he came out and said she's inspiring and capable.
People get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
The nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes.
What is the solution for voters in the fossil fuel industry?
Giving the workers an ability to transition. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
Raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation.
Abolish ICE.
Yeah.
Is that a position you agree with?
And we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Outdated, it is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What people
yes.
To reduce red meat specifically.
Yes.
People who are convicted in prison prison, like the Boston Marathon bombers, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So for people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
I am opposed to any policy that would deny any human being public health, period.
The more people get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
We did it, Joe.
Great commercial.
Great commercial. Problem is, it's 90 seconds, and you can't make it any shorter because there's just so much crazy. There's so much leftism that you have to cover. You can't just give it a pass. So it's kind of like trying to drink out of a fire hose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you explain to the average voter who really only cares when election day comes around? How do you explain a decade of policy, a decade of everything she said, right? It's almost like you have to run these ads and say, stay tuned for part 2. And then you run the next one, the next commercial break, stay tuned for part 3.
Part 3.
Because there's just so much. There's just so much. And this is why she didn't get a single vote in the Democrat primary.
Right.
She has never had someone cast a ballot for her to be the Democrat nominee for president. It has never happened. And yet she has just been coronated by acclamation.
Let's not forget, she's really enjoying that honeymoon right now, right? But there's been no talk of a VP pick. And I think their hope is that when they do pick their VP, it'll give her another bump, right? They're hoping for a honeymoon and then a bump in the polls from a VP pick. But the moment she picks her VP, what do you want to bet it's going to be the most liberal person she could find?
I think it's going to be either Kelly in Arizona, Shapiro in Philadelphia. I don't think they'll go all female ticket. I don't think they'll do it. So I think it's going to be one of those two.
But whoever they end up picking, right, that'll be a total reflection on her candidacy, right? That's the second person that would be in charge if a President Kamala Harris were to have anything happen to her, right? I just don't think there's anybody out there that wants to take that political fire right now and be her pick, right? Because if this is throwaway time, do you want to be on the throwaway ticket? Are they going to have that excitement? Are they going to get that bump in the polls once they get that person picked? Right? I think they keep putting this off as long as they can because her VP pick isn't going to help.
They're not putting it off. Josh, they're still going to nominate her early. They're planning to still nominate her and do the counting of the delegates over Zoom. It's not even going to be that the convention decides. They're going to ram this through before anyone steps foot in Chicago for the convention.
Why even have people that are part of your party if nobody has a voice in the Democrat party? That we've essentially just made the argument for, right? No matter how you feel, they're going to pick somebody else.
The narrative has to be that she is the most liberal Democrat senator, the most liberal. And the only reason she is now at the top of the ticket is because the party elites had no choice. She's the only one who could plausibly have a claim to Joe Biden's campaign cash, though that's now being challenged. Mm-hmm. And it's political suicide to tell the female black vice president that, sorry, it's not your turn. She is president without a single Democrat voter voting for her to be the presidential nominee. And she would not have been the presidential nominee if they had let the people vote.
And isn't there some question about whether her parents are in the U.S. on legal visas at the time and whether she can actually hold the office?
That is a dangerous path to go down because they're going to say, oh, they did that to Barack Obama. Now they're doing it to her. Absent the Supreme Court overturning that idea of birthright citizenship, that interpretation of the 14th Amendment, without the Supreme Court doing that, it's a dangerous argument to me. It's a legitimate argument, right? Anyone who thinks that birthright citizenship is ridiculous, it's a legitimate argument. But it's one of those danger things, right? That will resonate really well with Republicans. Do we need to resonate really well with Republicans? No. Polling suggests we do not. We need to resonate with the independents, with the moms and dads.
Did I have you there, buddy?
Oh,
there you go.
We have to explain to them, you think groceries are expensive now. Guess what happens if she gets in and bans fracking and the cost of gas doubles?
Yeah.
And bans offshore drilling and the cost of gas doubles. What do you think happens to your milk, to your eggs, to your bread that has to be trucked to the store by a gas diesel powered truck? That goes up. That goes up. You cannot let her anywhere near the halls of power. If you want your family to have a future, you want your family to be fed, you want to save for retirement, right? God forbid you want to take a vacation every now and then. You cannot let her anywhere near the halls of power.
No. So if you live in Pennsylvania and if you're working in the energy sector, if you ever wondered whether she was the candidate for you or not, Kamala Harris is not it, because she will destroy American energy independence. I don't want $15 an ounce for ham.
And then after you're done sending all of your money to the grocery store, because you still have to eat, guess what? Every illegal alien who comes through is going to be put onto Obamacare. It's going to be put onto Medicaid. And your tax burden is going to go up. They're either going to get put into your private health insurance pool and they're going to raise your cost of insurance, or they're going to go on completely government funded insurance like Medicaid, and you're just going to have to pay for that through your taxes. It's insane. It's insane. It's insane. But
it's a reality. But it's a reality if you don't go out and vote and get your friends to vote Republican and Trump in this next election. So get off your lazy asses and vote.
Yes.
I mean that in a nice way.
That's it for this edition of the podcast. If you like the podcast, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button down if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube. Easy if you're watching on Twitter/X. Welcome. We go live on Twitter, Rumble, and YouTube as well. We also have the audio edition of the podcast. We try and make this audio friendly. So do check that out. Subscribe to that as well. That's it for this edition. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerling.
Remember, the fight to take back our country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together. See you next time.
See you.